all coming for the top of the zone, but will Alliance Rogue be able to hold on? Melty comes up with one. The trades are going back and forth. They've got to come up with...
A good roller player is one of the hardest things to deal with for the other team. It's a class of weapons that really play off the high paint control Splatoon has and keeps other players constantly cautious. This class of weapons are typically good at two things: sharking and ledge camping. Rollers all have a horizontal swing with a pretty wide one-shot hitbox. That means as long as you're close enough, you can secure the kill pretty reliably, which means anytime a player goes against one of these, they're forced to keep track of where the roller player might be hiding and stay more cautious of enemy ink than usual. And when that roller can make it under a ledge, they can be even harder to deal with. That's where they utilize a vertical flick, a slower attack with a much more narrow hitbox that also has a lot more range. This can keep people away from a ledge or even kill through walls, creating a situation where the weapon has to be respected. They can also roll, which outside of players who pass level 10 is only really useful for painting walls, camping jumps, or style points. There's a variety of different rollers. Fast, stealthy, slow but powerful and supportive, flexible. However, there is one exception, a roller that's quite different. This is the Big Swig, originally shown off by rolling around and nothing else. This roller is weird. Let's start with the roller's horizontal flick. Remember the consistent one shot that all the other ones have? This roller has a weak 70 damage one that's almost useless in combat by itself, completely taking away how reliable it can be at killing. Instead, the weapon trades this off for a lot of paint and a really wide flick, which sound nice and come in handy sometimes, but it does make the weapon lose a lot of presence in actual teamfights. Okay, so clearly this leans to beginner players, with a roller that wants to paint and be more supportive. That seems to make sense, until you look at its vertical flick. Would you believe me if I told you that Big Swig actually has the hardest vertical flick in the entire game? If you compare it with all the other rollers, it turns out that Swig's is actually quite a lot thinner. Despite the smaller hitbox though, the damage and range on this vertical flick actually are quite better than some of the other rollers, being most comparable to regular roller, where it actually outranges it in both 1 and 2 shot range, which gives it a lot more potential in the hands of an experienced player. So now we have two very different swings for very different types of players. There's also the roll. While Swig's roll has a little bit of a wider paint trail than usual, the horizontal flick paints so well that you basically don't need to use it for this. And well, like the horizontal flick, it doesn't actually one-shot, which removes pretty much all of its use cases. That's a weird start, but the story doesn't end here though. Weapons in Splatoon typically get paired with a kit, a sub, and special combination to either help enhance a weapon's strengths or cover its weaknesses, helping to give weapons a sense of identity. And rollers have tended to have some of the better ones. Carbon Roller, which is the shortest range one, has two tools to help deal with its range disadvantage. The regular one, with the most stealthy playstyle, has tools to threaten getting in and secure a position when it does. Dynamo Roller, being the slowest and most supportive one, has a kit to help with paint output and a team-oriented special. And Fling's flexibility between paint with its vertical flick and up-close kills with its horizontal has both a more passive kit for defensive players and aggressive kit for those who want to go in. Swig also has two kits, of course, but they're some of the most odd kit choices in the entire series. First one has Splash Wall, a sub that's typically useful for blocking attacks from one direction, most commonly seen on mid-range weapons to be able to control space, or shorter-range fighting weapons to be able to hold ground against longer-range opponents. For Big Swig, it kind of just prevents people from shooting back at you. There's not a whole lot you can use it for. And for the special, it has Ink Vacuum, a supportive tool that takes away your main weapon to absorb enemy ink and try to protect teammates. Which, if the weapon's going for a supportive role, at least fits that, but it does remove the weapon's high paint output, which makes the kit feel odd to say the least. It's tools that don't really fit the weapon intuitively, but it at least matches the role it's going for. The other kit has a Line Marker, the hardest sub in the entire game. This can bounce around different walls and requires a direct hit to do any form of damage, doing a whopping 40. Quite a bit less than other options like Burst Bomb, which can do almost the same amount of damage on an indirect hit. Clearly, we're back to leaning into a more difficult kit for experienced players right off the bat. But then we matched it with Inkstorm, a simple special that provides pain and damage in a set area for 8 seconds. It's hard to really tell what this kit is trying to do either. The sub is way too hard to make the weapon more consistent in combat, while the special only lightly boosts something it did just fine. No one really talks about the weapon much, but I think the most interesting part about it is really trying to tell what its identity is supposed to be. Is it trying to be more supportive like the horizontal flicks it just, or more aggressive like the vertical one does? Is this for experienced players with precise options like the vertical flick hitbox or line marker, or for beginner players with its simplified roll? Even the kits are kinda confused on what it's trying to be. And well, unfortunately, this has led to a weapon that sees practically no tourney use since its release. The most notable example I remember seeing this in an Area Cup top 4, promptly followed by this. I think it's a bit of a shame, because despite all these odd choices, I think the weapon still ends up pretty fun. It's honestly a personal favorite of mine to use. Having such a varied and mismatched toolkit and main weapon options just makes it feel a little bit silly sometimes. While I hope that one day the main weapon gets some helpful changes, for now, I'll take it being fun.